So today we're going to be making white sandwich bread. In your recipe manual, this is called white pan bread or Pullman loaf. So to begin, I have my mise en place scaled out. I have my bread flour, my yeast. Today we're using active dry, my warm water, sugar, non-fat milk powder, sea salt, and shortening. I also have my dough hook ready to go and my small 5-quart mixer. So to begin, we're going to be following our straight dough mixing method. So this mixing method is used to make lean yeast doughs. Lean yeast doughs are doughs that have a lower percentage of fat, sugar, and eggs. So you'll notice in my formula that I do have sugar and fat. I have my shortening, but these are such small quantities that this dough really would not be considered high in terms of fat or sugar percentage. So those doughs, we use a different mixing method for doughs that do have a higher percentage of fat and sugar. So we'll get to that later on in the course. But for today, we are making a lean yeast dough. The word lean is referring to, like I mentioned, the percentage of fat, sugar, and eggs. This formula does not have any eggs for today. So what this mixing method tells me is not just how long and for what speeds I'm going to be mixing on, but it tells me the order that the ingredients are going to go into our bowl. So some people call this the WYFE method, W-Y-F-E. And what that's telling you is the order that the ingredients go into the bowl. So W-Y-F-E, WYFE, stands for water, yeast, food, and everything else. W-Y-F-E. So our food in this is anything that is going to feed our yeast. So really anything with a type of sugar. So we have our bread flour that has our proteins and our starches. We also have our granulated sugar and our milk powder. This non-fat milk powder has sugar in it as well. All of these items are going to feed our yeast. And as our yeast feeds, it's going to produce the two byproducts of fermentation, which are carbon dioxide gas and alcohol. And that's what's going to give us the flavor in our breads. Our shortening here is going to act as a tenderizer. So this fat is going to help to soften our dough. So into my bowl, following our WYFE method, I have my warm water. My water is about 98 degrees. And that's so that it can start getting our yeast happy. So yeast is kept happy by food, meaning our sugars in both our flour and our granulated sugar and our milk. And it likes to be kept warm. So my warm water goes in the bowl first. So I have my water. Yeast. I'm just going to sprinkle that right on top. Let that rehydrate a little bit. So we have our water, yeast, food. My food, I'm going to begin with my flour. Remember, the F in the WYFE method stands for food. It doesn't stand for flour, it stands for food, because we also have sugar, granulated sugar, that's a food, as well as our dehydrated non-fat milk powder. So we have our water, yeast, food, and the E is everything else. So we have our fat and our salt. Now what's important about this is you never want your salt to come into direct contact with your yeast. So that's why I put my flour in first, because not first, but right after my yeast, because it's acting as a barrier between my yeast and my salt. Salt kills yeast. So if it comes into direct contact, you're not going to have any fermentation in your dough at all. So I like to use my foods as kind of a separator between those ingredients. So notice that I didn't mix anything. I just layered everything into my bowl, and I'm going to let my machine do the work. Now, this is a home KitchenAid. This is really not a machine that's meant to mix bread doughs, so I'm going to mix this using my hook just for the first couple minutes, and then I'm going to turn this out onto my board, and I'm actually going to knead it by hand. So I have my dough hook on, I have my KitchenAid ready to go, and I just wanted to review the speeds and the mix times. So if we were in the bread shop and we were working with our professional KitchenAids, we would be using low speed, medium speed, and high speed. This machine has 10 speeds on it, so I'm going to be utilizing the first couple numbers as low speed, or what we call first speed, and then around number 4 or 5 is going to be second speed or medium speed. And then once we get up into these numbers, about 8 to 10 will be high speed. These machines, like I said, are not meant to mix large amounts of dough or really tough doughs. So normally on my professional KitchenAids, I would do first speed for 3 minutes, second speed for about 5 to 8 minutes, and then third speed for 30 seconds. These different speeds and mix times allow our dough to go through 3 stages of mixing a lean yeast dough. So those stages are pickup, cleanup, and gluten development. So I'm going to be able to show you pickup on this machine. So I'm going to turn this up to about number 1 or 2. And pickup means that my dough hook is beginning to pick up all of the ingredients and start to form them into a ball. So as this mixes for 3 minutes, you'll notice that it goes through a physical change. When you look at it, you'll see that the ingredients are going to begin to come together. They're going to form a little ball, and then they'll mix together homogeneously. They're going to look a little, the ball's going to look a little kind of wrinkly and kind of like cellulite. The more it mixes, the smoother the ball gets. And that's how you know that your gluten is starting to get strong. So our dough's been mixing for a little less than a minute, and you can see that the ingredients are beginning to pick up on the hook and form a little bit more of a homogeneous mixture. This again is the first stage of mixing a lean yeast dough, which is called pickup, where the ingredients are beginning to pick up from the bottom of the bowl and form around the dough hook and into a homogeneous mixture. My dough mixed on first speed for about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, and I can see that the machine isn't really doing the work that I expect it to. So I'm gonna use my hands. Clean hands are your best tools. So I'm gonna come right in here and I'm going to get all of my dough out. Using my bowl scraper, I'm going to get all of those ingredients out. This is my bowl scraper. It is a flexible spatula that has a round end as well as a flat end. So this allows me to use the spatula with the concaveness of a bowl and get in there and really get out what I need to. So now I'm going to use my hands and I'm just going to knead with the heel of my hand and get my starches to absorb all of the hydration, and also to knead this into a mass that is a little smoother. Normally my machine would do this work for me, but we use what we got. Bread bakers didn't always have machines that they could rely on to do all this work, so there's nothing wrong with using your hands. There's something therapeutic about getting your hands on your dough and really feeling the structure and the stickiness and just the organic feel of a bread. So you can see that it's coming together better than it had in the mixer, but we're still not very smooth. This is what it begins to look like after the cleanup stage. So the cleanup stage in the bowl is when your hook forms a ball like this and it begins to clean up all of the dough that is, all the ingredients that are stuck on the sides of the bowl. That usually happens on second speed or a medium speed. So I'm going to just use the stickiness and the tackiness of my dough to clean up all of the little scraps that were on my bench. Or today I'm using a cutting board, big butcher's block. And I'm gonna keep kneading. So the technique is the same for all lean yeast doughs. Remember that a lean yeast dough is a dough that has a low percentage of fat, sugar, and eggs. So as I knead this by hand, I see the seam here. I kind of fold that over with the heel of my hand, kind of turn it into itself, and then knead that into the center. Turn it 90 degrees and just keep doing it. Because I'm doing this by hand, I may have to knead this in 2 parts where I get it a little bit smoother and then I'll cover it with plastic wrap so that it doesn't dry out. I'll let it rest on my bench for about 10 minutes just so that the gluten can relax. So your gluten is coming from your flour. White flour, comes from the endosperm of the wheat kernel. Your 2 proteins in your white flours are glutenin and gliadin. When you add moisture to those 2 proteins, as well as mixing, they begin to form a really strong bond or matrix. They start to link up to each other. And the more you mix, the tighter they get. So here's your glutenin, here's your gliadin. You add moisture and you begin to mix and they link up. The more you mix, the tighter it gets, the tighter it gets, the tighter it gets, the tighter it gets, to the point where they're so linked that they can stretch nice and long. But when you over mix it, that's when you get that stretching back in your dough. So if your dough starts to fight you, you need to let it relax. So that's what I'm gonna do here as I am developing this by hand. You know, your elbow is not as strong as a machine. So I'm going to let this rest on my board for about 10 minutes so that those 2 proteins that are linking up, the glutenin and the gliadin, they formed my gluten. I'm gonna let them relax about 10 minutes and then I'm gonna come back and knead again so that I can get it nice and smooth.